Okay, Chapter 9, The Writing on the Wall. What's going on here? What's going on? Attracted, no doubt, by Malfoy's shout, Argus Filch came shouldering his way through the crowd, and then he saw his cat, Mrs. Norris, and fell back, clutching his face in horror. My cat, what has happened to Mrs. Norris? He shrieked, and his eyes fell on Harry. You've frozen my cat. You've frozen her. I'm cross. Argus. From behind, we heard Dumbledore has arrived. Professor Dumbledore, followed by a number of other teachers. In seconds, he had swept past Harry, Ron, and Hermione and detached Mrs. Norris from the bracket. Come with me, Argus, he said to Filch. You too, Mr. Potter, Mr. Weasley, Miss Granger. Lockhart stepped forward eagerly. My office is nearest, Headmaster, just upstairs. Please feel free to... Thank you, Gilderoy, said Professor Dumbledore. The crowd silently parted to let them past. Lockhart, looking excited and important, hurried after Dumbledore. So did Professors McGonagall and Snape. As they entered Lockhart's darkened office, there was a flurry of movement across the walls. Harry saw several of the Lockharts in the pictures dodging out of sight, their hair in rollers. The real Lockhart lit the candles on his desk and stood back. Dumbledore laid frozen Mrs. Norris on the polished surface and began to look at her. Harry, Ron, and Hermione exchanged tense looks and sank into the chairs outside of the pool of candlelight, just watching. The tip of Dumbledore's long, crooked nose was barely an inch from Mrs. Norris's fur. He was looking at her closely through his half-moon spectacles, his long fingers prodding and poking. Professor McGonagall was bent almost as close. Her eyes narrowed. Snape loomed behind them, half in shadows, wearing a most peculiar expression. It was as though he was trying hard not to smile, and Lockhart was hovering around all of them, making suggestions. It was definitely a curse that froze her, probably the transfiguration torture. I've seen it used many times. So unlucky I wasn't there. I know the very counter curse that would have saved her. Lockhart's comments were punctuated by Filch's dry, cackling sobs. He was crying because his cat got frozen. Lockhart's comments were punctuated by cackling sobs. He was slumped in the chair by the desk, unable to look at Mrs. Norris, his face in his hands. As much as he detested Filch, Harry couldn't help feeling sorry for him, though not really as sorry as he felt for himself. If Dumbledore believed Filch, he would be expelled for sure. Professor Dumbledore was now muttering strange words under his breath and tapping Mrs. Norris with his wand, but nothing happened. I remember something very similar happening in Ogagudu, said Lockhart. A series of attacks, the full stories in my autobiography book. I was able to provide the townsfolk with some amulets which cleared the matter up at once. The photographs of Lockhart on the walls were all nodding in agreement. One of them had forgotten to remove his hairnet. At last, Dumbledore straightened up. Well, she's not dead, Argus, he said. Not dead, said Filch, but she's all stiff and frozen. She's been petrified. Ah, I thought so, said Lockhart. But Dumbledore said, but how? I do not know. Ask him, shrieked Filch, turning his blotched and tear-stained face to Harry. No second year could have done this, said Dumbledore firmly. It would take dark magic of the most advanced. He did do it, he said, pointing at Harry. He found my office. He knows I'm a squib. I never touched Mrs. Norris, said Harry loudly, uncomfortably aware of everyone looking at him. And I don't even know what a squib is. Rubbish, snarled Filch. He saw my quick spell class letter. If I might speak, Headmaster, said Snape from the shadows. and Harry's sense of foreboding increased. He was not sure Snape had anything to say that would do him good. Potter and his friends have simply been in the wrong place at the wrong time, he said, a slight sneer curling in his mouth as though he doubted it. But we do have a set of suspicious circumstances here. Why was he in the upstairs corridor at all? Why wasn't he at the Halloween feast? Ron and Harry and Hermione all launched together into an explanation about the Death Day party. There were hundreds of ghosts. They'll tell you we were there. But why not join the feast afterwards, said Snape, his black eyes glittering in the candlelight. Why go up that corridor? Ron and Hermione looked at Harry. Because we were tired and we wanted to go to bed, he said. Without any supper, said Snape, a triumphant smile flickering across his gaunt face. I didn't think the ghosts provided food fit for people living people at their parties. We weren't hungry, said Ron loudly, as his stomach gave a big rumble. Snape's nasty smile widened. I might suggest, Headmaster, that Potter is not being entirely truthful, he said. It might be a good idea if he was deprived of certain privileges until he is ready to tell us the whole story. I personally feel he should be taken off the Gryffindor Quidditch team until he is ready to be honest. Really, Severus, said Professor McGonagall sharply. I see no reason to stop the boy playing Quidditch. This cat wasn't hit over the head with a broomstick. There's no evidence at all that Potter has done anything wrong. Dumbledore was giving Harry a searching look. His twinkling light blue gaze made Harry feel as though he was being x-rayed. Innocent until proven guilty, Severus, he said firmly. Snape looked furious. So did Filch. My cat was frozen, he shrieked, his eyes open. I want to see somebody get punished. We will be able to cure her, Argus, said Dumbledore patiently. Professor Sprout recently managed to procure some mandrakes. As soon as they have reached their full size, I will have a potion made that will revive Mrs. Norris. And I'll make it, Lockhart butted in. I must have done it 100 times. I could whip up a mandrake restorative draught in my sleep. Excuse me, said Snape icily, but I believe I am the potions master at this school. There was a very awkward pause. You may go, Dumbledore said to Harry, Ron, and Hermione. They went as quickly as they could without actually running. When they were a floor up from Lockhart's office, they turned into an empty classroom and closed the door quietly behind them. Harry squinted at his friends' darkened faces. Do you think I should have told them about the voice I heard? No, said Ron without hesitation. Hearing voices no one else can hear isn't a good sign, even in the wizarding world. Something in Ron's voice made him ask, You do believe me, don't you? Of course I do, said Ron. But you must admit it's weird. I know it's weird, said Harry. The whole thing's weird. What was that writing on the wall all about? The chamber has been opened. What's that supposed to mean? You know, it sort of rings a bell, said Ron slowly. I think someone told me a secret about a chamber at Hogwarts once. Might have been Bill. And what's a squib, said Harry. To his surprise, Ron stifled a snigger. Well, it's not really funny, but as it's Filch, a squib who was someone born into a wizarding family, but who hasn't got any powers. Kind of the opposite of muggle-born wizards, but squibs are quite unusual. If Filch is trying to learn magic from a quick spell course, I reckon he must be a squib. It would explain a lot, like why he hates students so much. Ron gave a satisfied smile. He's bitter. A clock chimed somewhere. It's midnight, said Harry. We had better get to bed before Mr. Snape comes along and tries to frame us for something else. We will find out what happens in the next chapter. Good night.